Hey. Ooh, that's loud. Sorry, I'm going to be very loud. I'm just giving you a heads up. That's how I do. So how many of you are here for the stickers? No? Yes, thank you. Well, I do have stickers for you. Just come up to me afterwards. I did tweet that out in hopes of filling the room, because we all love stickers. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about UX and accessibility. So I'm going to start with a really bad joke. And you probably heard it, but it has a point. So there's this person who goes to the doctor, and they complain about their shoulder hurts whenever they move their arms like that. And the doctor, they just said, stop moving it like that. Problem solved. See, wasn't very funny. Especially so when you're Apple. And you say basically the exact same thing to the people who were complaining about signal degradations and dropped calls in their iPhone 4s. Because if you accidentally bridged that little gap, oh, there we go, that little gap down here, no bandwidth. So allegedly, someone emailed to Apple and complained. And if you look down here, it says, stop holding it like that. So basically the same thing as the very bad joke. Now for me, personally, I think this is a very horrible way to actually talk to your customers. Because who are they to tell you how you are supposed to use your very expensive device that you saved up to buy? I don't agree with that. But it makes me think about a principle, the principle of least astonishment. So if a necessary feature has a high astonishment factor, it may be necessary to redesign that feature. Meaning that things, or applications, or web pages should act in a way that the users actually expect it to act, without surprises. My name is Jessica Engström. I work as a community manager at Detectify for a bunch of awesome ethical hackers. I'm also a developer technology MVP, and I paused there because I recently changed categories, so I'm still trying to learn the name. Together with my husband, who's actually in the audience, we run a podcast, a stream, what have you, events. So if you're into that sort of things, which I'm guessing you are, shameless plug, we're coding after work. Today I will give you a couple of examples of more practical examples that you can use in your day-to-day developing days, if you will, and also the top accessibility issues that we have on the web. But first, I do want to clear a few things up, because there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to UI and UX. This might feel a little bit familiar. You've seen images like this, where you have the classical glass bottle of ketchup representing the UI, and we have the plastic squeezy bottle representing UX. Or, like on this side, we have the before UX and after UX, which is sometimes also shown where you have the little bit more basic design, and after UX you have a little bit more prettier design. Now, you can't just add UX to something like it's some magical pixie dust. I'm sorry if you thought that, because that's not the case. We can improve upon it for sure, but I see it like this. Both of them has a UI, and both of them has a UX, how we use the ketchup bottle in this case. I don't know why I'm picking ketchup bottles, because I don't even like ketchup. But here we go. If you look at this person down here, this is the after UX. The plastic bottle, but they're still having a bad experience. So it doesn't matter if it's a good experience or a bad experience, it's equally as much a UX. But I do have a favorite package, a ketchup package, and it's this one. Because I like when you try to include as many people as possible at the same time. So this one actually caters for those who wants to dip their fries and to those who wants to squeeze it all over the fries, or whatever we have ketchup on nowadays, I don't know. Again, I'm not that big of a fan, but I am a fan of this package. We actually took this picture at I think it was in Newark, at the airport. And I was one of those persons that just jumped up, oh, look at this, it's awesome UX, and I started to take pictures of my ketchup package. That's, yeah, sorry. Everyone else, oh, look at that, Statue of Liberty. Me, ketchup. So there you go. But as humans, we have limitations. Our sight is limited, our memory is limited, and our attention is limited. I'm pretty sure that at least a third of you have checked your phones while I've been here for, 5 minutes? Because our attention span is that short nowadays. But if we design with those limitations in mind, that will benefit the users really, really well, and us as well, because if we have happy users, that's better for us. They will actually perceive your applications and your webs as faster, more intuitive, easier, and more beautiful, without even changing the design. In psychology, there's something called cognitive load, which is basically what we do with the CPU on our laptops when we are running too many, let's call them heavy applications. If you're into Photoshop or InDesign or Visual Studio or what have you, if you try to run multiple instances of those, the computer will lag a little. And the same is true for our brains. So we need to keep that in mind when we design. Everything from distracting information, too much information, and also unnecessary steps will derail the user's train of thought. And I do actually have an example from unnecessary step. It's my favorite thing to hate, so I will show that at the very end of this talk. Look at this number. Now, do you remember it? No, it's not that easy, is it? It's 16 numbers. I have no clue. I have had this presentation with the same numbers for a couple of times. I still don't remember this number. But if we divide it up into 4 simple chunks, it's all of a sudden just 4 numbers I need to remember. Granted, it's 4 times 4 numbers, but my brain can actually handle that. And this will also reduce that cognitive load. So in a way, shopping online is a good way to reduce the cognitive load. No? My bank does not agree with that, but that's a completely different story. But we can do the same trick with our UI and our UXs if we want. If we take forms, for example, forms we come in contact, well, at least on a weekly basis, I feel like I do with them all the time. So we have a form, just a standard form, if you will. We have some input boxes, we have some data. But in the Western world, we read from left to right, which means if we put the input labels on the left side of the input boxes, we will get 32 visual fixations. So that's 32 places where the users need to stop, focus, read, move on, stop, focus, read, move on, and so on. But if we instead just move it, well, here's the zigzag pattern we're reading in it as well. But if we put it on top of the input boxes, as humans, we group things. So this now is just groups, which means we are consuming them together. So this is now only 18 visual fixations. So we have almost cut it in half by just doing that simple trick. We can do more things. We can, my number one favorite tip, don't use templates like the last one you did. I know it's super easy and it's convenient, but if we ask for more than we actually need, chances are you won't get that many answers at all, which is not really good. Is it really relevant data? What gender I identify with when I sign up for a blog post or a blog newsletter, for instance? Maybe not. Same thing goes for age range. We can actually programmatically find that out because down here we're asking for the date of birth, if age is even important in this case. And marital status? That feels kind of outdated, doesn't it? So let's remove that as well. Now, I did talk about dates. So here we have 3 drop-downs for our date of birth. We can actually opt to have one single input box, but there is a caveat, which I will get back to in a second. I've also simplified first name and last name to full name, because it feels shorter. It's the same amount of data I need to fill in, but for me, it feels like I'm just filling in one box instead of 2. So we still have a bunch of zigzag going on, but now we have space. So let's move them into one row. Now we're down to 9 visual fixations. Now, if you're very observant or very fast to count, you will only see 8 because we ran out of space. So what do? We don't scroll. It's better if we actually split it up because we get this same effect from the credit card numbers if we put it in different pages. Honestly, even if it were to fit on the screen, it doesn't hurt to split it up because, again, it's easier to consume if we have small, easier to digest pages instead of one long one. It will feel so much better for the user. Another thing, this might be one of my favorite things, showing a progress indicator and also starting it, pre-start it, will increase the number of people who actually fill in the form dramatically, just by doing that. Because we are all dopamine achievement hunters, if you will. We want that check mark. It's halfway there. I'm almost done. And this will also show that I'm upfront, I'm honest with the user, because you see here, I have 3 pages that I want you to fill in. So they will know exactly how much effort I want them to put in. Now, the button. Let's talk about the button. Let's put it, where am I? Here I am. Right in the line of sight to the left. Because if we put it to the right, and we are using a screen enlargement tool, all of a sudden, over here, it's kind of difficult to find compared to if it was on the left side instead. And also, buttons. What does continue mean? In some cases, continue makes sense, or you can kind of understand what we're trying to do here, but is it continue to the next step? Is it continue with my application? Is it continue, what is it? I don't know. So let's change that to something a little bit more clear. In my case, I'm choosing to call it next step, because that's what we're doing, we're going to the next step. And yes, it would probably be enough to have continue if we are using the progress indicators as well, because they know that we're continuing to the next step. But for me, if I have put this in place to always think about what the button actually does, I don't forget it when I need to, when I don't have a progress indicator. So it doesn't hurt to be overly clear. Helping the users with smart default, that's also very, very nice. We know exactly what to put in. We don't want the user to have to stop and think how we want the date to be filled in, for instance, or was it first name, last name, or last name, first name. Think for the user, because it will make them so much more effective, and we will get more answers again. So again, we talked about the date of birth. Here's the caveat. If you are going to use just one input box for that, make sure that you are very clear on what format you want the date to be filled in. because sometimes dates are difficult. You probably know this, especially if you have an international base. But then we think, but I can see whether the browser is in English or Swedish, right? Or the operating system, or something, yeah. But I'm one of those who messes that data up, because all my devices are in English. Some of them have the region Sweden, some does not. So it does not give you 100% certainty. So be overly clear, and we're fine to use one input box. Letting the users know that they have succeeded, we already know that's a good thing, and this is actually more powerful than we might think. In this case, we are using a green frame around the input box. However, to be more inclusive, we need to add a symbol for anything that is important as well, because there are people who do not see colors as the majority of people. Show the error where they are, and not in a long list, like 5 pages down. You know which pages I'm talking about. We need to know where the issue is so we can fix it with ease. And again, for accessibility, we are using a symbol for that as well. Think about the language you are using when you're, for this example, we have wrong format. If we are using words like you put in the date wrong or error or things like that, we will inadvertently put some blame on the user. Instead, show what we actually need. Because if I mess that up, I don't have the smart defaults to rely on. I need to know how to put it in. So now the user will know, in this case me, how to actually put in the date. So with a few steps, we went from this to this. I mean, there's still a lot of things we can improve upon. I could probably stand here for 4 hours just talking about the benefits of doing great forms. Things like always having a way for the user to opt out anytime they feel that they need to. Having a way to go back in the UI when you realize you shouldn't have used your work email. You should have used your, spam email to sign up for this or something like that, so they don't lose the data. Also, make sure that the input boxes actually has a contrasting color, even if it's not as pretty as one would think or one would like, because it will help a lot if it's very clear that this is an input box. Now, we all want our users to navigate through our applications and webs with ease. And to do that, we need to lower that cognitive load or take advantage of the natural cognitive processes. And that means we need to reduce interference. Now, if things are arranged in a way so the hierarchy or information is very clear, you're good to go. Like this. Very easy to read. You've probably seen a million varieties of this game, if you will, where you can read the written color with ease if it's congruently colored or in a neutral color. When we mix it up, we can still read it, but it will take longer. It will be a little bit harder to do. So this is interference. I mean, we're talking about, what, a couple of 100 milliseconds to maybe a second or two, but all those milliseconds adds up, and they can make people rage quit. I'm a rage quitter. I hope I'm not the only one. No. Now, I have put in this image, but for a split second, I will still read stop on the red sign, and I will still read go on the green one. Because in the Western world, we associate red with stop. So again, we have that interference. And we can actually find these types of interference in the real world as well. Like IKEA in Stockholm. We don't have the interference here. They do it good. We have those gates with the LEDs in green, so very welcoming. Come in. It even says in. And over here, on the other side, we have out in blue. Blue doesn't mean out, but it means not in. So very clear. Now, if you are a very large chain in Sweden, and you have the brilliant idea of using your logo, this logo, in your doors, I can tell you exactly what happens, because this is a shop which is fairly close to us. It's not the one we go to daily. I don't even shop daily, but you know what I'm saying. I've been here maybe 20, 30 times. Every single time, I go there and like, oh, that's the exit. No, wait. Every single time. Because it's red. So, I mean, it is branded, but I will get that conflict. I don't know if it's make or break, if it takes me 2 more seconds to actually get my groceries, but it's still a conflict. So giving the users clear information, and especially error messages, will help them a lot. I mean, we all make mistakes. The users will understand that, unless we put up error messages like this. What does this mean? Should the user just turn off the application? Should they turn off the computer? Should they call the fire department? This is just scary. Or this is a Swedish bank app. First they scare me, and then they give me null. What does that mean? I don't have an account? Where's my money? There's no way of knowing. So, let's look at error messages and how to make good ones. And let's take the 404 page as an example, because again, we kind of run into that on a day-to-day basis, it feels like. Now, research has found that poorly designed error messages will lower the stress levels and anxiety levels on a physical level. It's measurable. So if we screw up, we will increase the cortisol level in the users. For me, that's just mind-blowing. So let's talk about what not to do. Well, actually, a good error message should have plain text. It should be just regular language that everyone understands. So in this case, they are sort of, but they don't get any points for it, because they are also using technical jargon that some people might not understand. A good error message is also actionable. And here, we get a lot of uncertainties. We have no buttons, we have no URLs, we don't even have a link to the first page, if you want, or the front page. So depending on what our page is doing, we could just have the easy way out is just to put in a URL to the front page. A good error message should also be very short. Well, not very short. It should be short but descriptive. Because if we have, how many are reading the EULAs? No? Exactly, because it doesn't add to the clarity when we have a lot of information to read through. And they will actually get the first point here, because it is short. Give a solution to the problem if there is a solution. Sometimes we can't fix whatever went wrong, but we can give options. Well, here, it might be temporarily unavailable. What does that mean? Can I just refresh? Is it here tomorrow? 10 minutes? 2 weeks? And it might have changed name. A lot of uncertainties. So no points for them. And never blame the users. And this comes down to what I said earlier. If we put in words like error, mistake, something went wrong, and not take responsibility, we will put that blame on the user. I mean, they're not blaming the user here, but they're not taking responsibility either. So it's better to be humble about it. The color red, in this case, that would be the equivalent of saying warning and things like that. So that's also not the best idea when we want to be kind to our users. So let's take another example of the same exact thing. We are using plain language. It is actionable because we have provided 3 pages here so the user can go around the problem. It is short, and we are giving the solution, or actually a workaround, but still we're trying to fix something. And we are humble. We are not blaming the user. So 5 steps, we get from this to that. And this, of course, applies to all types of error messages, not just the 404 page. But we do have some very good 404 pages out there. This is Disney's page on Avengers, and it says, "Oh snap, seems like our servers got dusted in the snap." It's okay to be witty, and it's okay to be funny, as long as we also live up to those other 5 steps. So GitHub also is very funny, so I had to use that as well. I might be a nerd, a little bit. Now, being consistent and not reinventing the wheel, so to say, will also help the users. So following platform and design guidelines and what have you, industry standards, it will be important for the users. The learnability will improve for the user, and they will feel that it's much easier to learn and it's easier to navigate and also faster. What would you say this is? Anyone? A spearhead? That's the first. Could be. If it's not a spearhead, what would it be? A leaf. Yes, thank you. That is what I think it is. So if it's a button, what would it do? Not as easy, right? This is from a learning management system. That's create new message. I mean, obviously. I think that it's supposed to be a very badly designed quill, or maybe they are showing that they're very eco-friendly, that you're not sending paper. But the odd thing is that in this system, there's 3 or 4 different ways to send messages. They're using the pen on every single page but this one. Makes no sense. So this will actually take a little bit longer for me to understand that, oh, right, it's this button. Again, we're talking about a few hundred milliseconds. But all of a sudden, we're up to a bunch of seconds slower than we should be. But issues like this, going a little bit too far out of conventions and standards, can also be found in the real world. Are you supposed to pee here or wash your hands? I would say that if you are a person who usually stands up doing their business, this feels vaguely familiar. And for those who sit down during their business, makes no sense. And I also think that if you look here, you can see that they have printed labels. They do not print labels if there's not been an accident or 15. So if we have a clear standard, things will become much clearer. And you will probably recognize this sign, this traffic sign up here. This is from London. This is from the Netherlands. We have Poland, and we have Sweden. They're not identical, but we can all figure out that this is the same thing we're trying to do here. So do that. Do not do the leaf thing for create new. Another thing that might happen from time to time is this. We have a in-flight entertainment system and their gaming department, or whatever the gaming section, if you can call it that. Up here, I can pause my game if I need to. Now I get bored of this game and I open another one, and all of a sudden there's no pause button. So I can't pause this game? Well, I can, but it's over here, which means I do not expect it to be over here. I expect it to be here. So it took me a while to understand that, wait, they have just moved it. And moving things around like that, it can actually render the icon completely invisible. It's there, but we don't see it because we don't expect it there. So if there is an industry standard for the symbol or the placement, stick to it. It will help you in the end. At least it will help your end users. Hierarchy is also something that is very important, because if it's aligned so the users understand what's most important, it will be so much easier. Again, we don't like to think when we go into pages and applications. We just want it to be served and move on. And this will also help to reduce that cognitive load I was talking about. Because as humans, we do not read pages. We scan them. And if anyone is sitting close to my husband, he will be fuming right now, because he hates this. He hates it so bad, because he has seen this a million times. Did you do it? Did you read it in order? There you go. Because we don't scan it. I think he's trying to beat the system, but it doesn't work. So we need to think about what is the most important thing on that page or application. We also need to think about what's the least important thing we have. Here's an example from a conference. Which speaker is doing what session? And I mean, being projectors and stuff like that, what you might not be able to see is that here, I have filled in the little divider they have. Did it make it clearer? No. This is bad hierarchy. So let's take another example. We have a blog. We have a bunch of blog posts that we want the users to read. Now, the first thing we can do is use proximity to make sure that we are grouping things. Again, it's now one group. It's not two different things. We want the subheaders to stand out a little, because we don't want them to read the whole blog post up here. This is just a preview text. So we want that to stick out a little bit better. And now we have a little bit more room to work with, so we can actually move down the content from the header as well. And not all blog posts are of the same importance. So here we can prioritize for the user. We can have the 4 top most read, or the 4 latest, or whatever we want, because as a user, I come in here and I see, okay, so I should concentrate on this. If I have time, I can read this 3 as well. So make the prioritization for the user. So let's click on a post. Now I have another question for you. What is the least important thing on this page? What do you think is the least important thing? The text? The top headline, exactly. I agree with you. Because how many times do you expect people to read that? They have already clicked it to get in here to read about it. So they might read it once or twice. Yet we keep giving it the most highest hierarchy in the world. Same goes for PowerPoint templates. All of them. The header. What are you most interested about? The content or the header? So I'm actually going to redesign that header to make it smaller. But now, the subheaders look super important. They are important, but they're not that important. So I'm just going to have them bold in the same size as the text. So the one on the right side, the after, if you will, that looks to me to something like something that the content is important. Now the one on the left side, you will have 4 in-your-face elements trying to get your attention to read them because they are super important in the hierarchy, which means you will try to read the text and all of a sudden you're reading the subheaders over and over again. I see a lot of people nodding. You've been there. This is also interference. I will say one thing though, if you do this for the web, if you want to resize your header, do not go for a different H tag. If this is an H1, restyle it. Do not use an H3 or an H4 or whatever is suitable. Otherwise, you will lose the accessibility. Because if we restyle it, the H1, all the screen readers and tools will still be able to keep the context. So that's super important. And on that topic, let's talk about accessibility. WebAIM, or Web Accessibility Mind, they do a sort of annual thing where they look into the top 1 million pages on the web. And they are using the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines to do that. And they have so much interesting data. But let's keep it short, shall we? 97.4% of the top 1 million web pages suck because they have accessibility issues. That's basically all of internet. Good news is that 97% of those are just within 6 categories. So if we just take a handful of those and improve upon that, we're home free and we have made the web a better place. So the most common accessibility issue that we have is contrast, or the lack of contrast. Now, contrast is the way to measure the differences in luminance between 2 colors, and that we measure that with a scale from 1:1 to 21:1. So 1:1 is black text on pure white background, for instance, or vice versa. And as a reference, red is 4:1, and blue is 8.6. Now, there are guidelines, there are minimum recommendations that we should use. And the minimum recommendation is 4.5:1. Now, I think it's pretty clear why this is a minimum recommendation, because it's not very clear. I would recommend that you at least use the enhanced accessibility guidelines for contrast here, which starts at 7. I usually am somewhere between 14 and 16 instead, because then you will get a bunch of contrast, but you won't get that much contrast that the text will follow you around and you will get that halo effect like you can get when you're reading pure white text on pure black background, where it follows you around when you look away from the computer. So somewhere in between here, perfect. We will still get a bunch of accessibility, a bunch of contrast. There's a bunch of tools that can help us with this. Basically all the web browser developer tools. There's contrastchecker.com and a bunch of other places where you can actually get help to find the right contrast. So the second most common accessibility issue is missing alt text. Almost 2/3 of the images on the top 1 million pages are of no use to a large group of people. We're not very good at web development, are we? On top of that, sometimes we have, let's call them questionable alt texts, where we are either a little bit lazy, or we're a little bit stressed, or we have someone breathing down our necks because there's new rules and regulations and things like that. So we use alt text like image or graphic or something along those lines. Cheating like this, because this is cheating, it's basically a slap in the face to anyone who actually depends on these. So don't do that. Alt text or alternative text is a textual substitute for anything that is not text, so images for this example. And technology today is very good. We have a lot of tools that can help us interpret an image. But the problem is that this cat, which is actually a sticker down here later, was interpreted as a parrot a year ago. Today, it is interpreted as a cat who's wearing a garment. Closer, but we're missing the context, because AIs are not very good at context. So the context is that this cat really, really wants to become a unicorn. So we need to provide an alternative text that can represent the content and the function. Here's a festive cat. We can put in either a descriptive text right underneath the picture itself, or we can put it in the image tag in the alt section here. And there are a couple of things that we should not do when it comes to alt text, and that is don't be redundant. Don't use really large descriptive text here. Just a white cat with sparkly festive antlers. We can also put in here, if we have the text close to the image, we can actually put in an empty alt tag here. That is fine, as long as we have the description right next to the image. Because if we put in the exact same thing, the screen readers will read it twice. Don't use, for the same reason, things like image of or picture of, because then it will interpret it as image of, image of. So we don't need to do that either. They're thinking for us. 2 things to do. Be accurate about the descriptive text that you're using. And be succinct without losing the context. So it's no use it doesn't add anything if I tell you that the pom-poms on the antlers are red and green, but it does add to the story that it's festive and sparkly. The third most common accessibility issue, this is a fast one. This is about making forms more usable. Label all the forms. This will help a lot. Now, just a quick one. This is the unnecessary step I love to hate. This is a time report system. I go to the page, I log in, I click go directly to time report. Awesome. I'm taken to this page. They're prompting me to log in. You're developers, some of you at least. You know that there's no way for me to know that I'm logged in, right? No. Okay, so I log in. I come to this page. I need to click on Go to Time Report. So I click on that. Guess what? I have to log in. Exactly. And finally, I get to the page where I can actually do my time report. So I had to log in on these pages, and these pages had different design and different layouts and different colors. Not very helpful. So this takes around 16 to 17 seconds to do. It should probably take a second or two. So I'm wasting 15 seconds every time I do my time report, which doesn't sound like much. It adds up to 5 minutes for 1 month. That's basically one very quick coffee. However, this is for one employee, one time, in one system. So say that we have an internal tool that we're using. We're 200 people working at this company. We're using that maybe 3 times a day. That sounds fair, right? All of a sudden, we're wasting 600 hours on nothing, because it's too expensive to fix our own internal tools, because the customer won't see it. So all of a sudden, it's not only about my user experience, it's about companies just bleeding money for nothing. Well, not for nothing, they will get a little bit more unhappy employees, But if there is one thing that I want you to take away from this talk, it is that UX and accessibility shouldn't come as an afterthought at the end of the process. It shouldn't be that feeling of, oh, right, I need to fix this color issue. It should be there from the beginning. Because if we are, for instance, doing a one-handed navigation for your phone, not only will you include the people who actually only have one arm, you will also include the people who have recently gotten a child, like at ICA, or no? That's not how it works? And also the people who are temporarily disabled. So stop seeing it as a disability and start seeing it as a way to include more people. Thank you. Stickers.